one more question before we proceed. Just wanted to go back to Imam al-Jawzi. When we look at the full Hanbali theology, the curriculum and the books, we have the authoritative scholars and the books. But Imam Ibn al-Jawzi is not in that curriculum, is he?
Well, if someone took Akhbar al-Sifat and looked at that, that would run alongside of it. But none of the elders in the time of that kitab, Daf Shubah, none of the elders in that time or after ever said that this is required reading for like your basic creed.
Yeah.
That's internal type of things that you would read. Like there's your foundational creed, and then there's your comparative discussion. But you wouldn't just give someone as like a common believer or a new Muslim or whatever else, just give them Daf Shubah Tashbih. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't just give them Kitab Akhbar al-Sifat, because there's a certain level of background knowledge that you would have, or that you would have to accurately understand the placement of these books.
Right.
Whereas if you gave the common slave of Allah the lum'ah, that's not an issue.
Right.
No one has an argument with that. But you would not give a common slave of Allah the Daf Shubah Tashbih or Kitab Akhbar al-Sifat, because there's background information to it. And there's references and quotes that Imam al-Jawzi rahimahullah is giving you that you're supposed to understand. And when he's making reference to idafa of tasharruf and idafa of it's like there's also a presupposing of a certain level of Arabic knowledge that you're supposed to have. He quotes a hadith with his own chain of transmission, which means that the person in question reading this will know the attribution of the hadith, because he has his own. You have to remember, these people at this level, they don't say, and this is collected by Bukhari, they have their own chain of transmission.
MashaAllah.
So they're citing from Al-Bukhari and things like this, but they're citing from their sheikhs with a chain of transmission back to that. So these aren't people that are, some of them aren't even saying Rawahu Bukhari as collected by Al-Bukhari. These are people who are citing directly from chains of transmission. So there's a whole background, there's a whole background that you have to fully grasp, appreciate, and put in context this discussion, why it happened, who were the people involved, and who exactly was Imam al-Jawzi, who exactly was he addressing.
Because the books he wrote, they were not mutun, right? Like you studied.
No, they weren't for memorizing. These kutub weren't for hifz.
Right.
They weren't for that. These were reference these were buhuth, which are reference or research manuals. These were written, and you can tell by the beginning of the book how he begins Kitab Akhbar al-Sifat, or how he begins Daf Shubah Tashbih, that's what it's for, which is another thing that makes you realize that people are ignoring the introduction.
Yes, that's another whole topic, actually.
Yes, it's a completely different thing of how to read a book. And let me say this at the outset. The first time someone wanted to draft Daf Shubah Tashbih into English, I was approached with the agreement that I would read the manuscript. I was sent the Arabic print of it, and it was agreed that I would read the translation and check it. So I said, okay, who's doing the translation? The translation was a modern Muslim brother. And upon reading the translation with the notes, there were some footnotes and also some commentary statements. I said, okay, listen, this translation should not go ahead, because there's a mistake on almost every page in creed. The person's misunderstood comparative creed. There are errors with regard to, even like the person was even misunderstanding some of the things that Imam al-Jawzi was saying. And then they were also getting like dates wrong of like who exactly is being addressed. Like they don't know who Ibn Hamid or Ibn al-Zahuni are. It's like you don't realize like who these people are, or their placement, or exactly what they said. Because when someone says, "Oh, Al-Qadi Ya'la was a mujassim," it's like, okay, where? Because we have Ibtal Ta'wilat, we have his Al-Mu'tamid for Usul al-Din, we have other kutub that he's written. Imam al-Jawzi's position was like, if we say that instead of being idafa, that these are sifa, it could lend towards towards tajsim if we don't, because we're back at the discussion of, is this an idafa or is it a sifa? Right? That's what the discussion is. So I said this should not go ahead until some comparative study of creed is done, because there's some mistakes that are here. Well, brother, we appreciate your things, but maybe it's just, and well, we have to understand the period of time. Well, you know, and they went ahead and published it anyway.
SubhanAllah.
Right. So now this book is in the English speaking realm, and people are misunderstanding the application of what Imam Al-Jawzi understood as creed, misunderstanding some foundational matters of creed, misunderstanding that this was an in-house discussion, and misunderstanding who these great elders of the past are. And the person in question that was head over this himself does not understand what the creed is and such. Like, what's the difference between a sifa and a idafa? He himself doesn't know this. Because I was physically present for these issues, because it was moving back between myself and the publishing house that was in charge of this. So when people ask me, I've seen a translation of Ibn Jawzi's book, my response is always, there is no translation.
Right.
There is no translation. And I want to put a line under this by saying this: in translation, you will lose about 30% in translation. That's probably what you're going to lose. If you add notes and appendices or appendices, you can probably drop it down to as little as 15%, or maybe 17%. But there's things that you're going to lose in translation that it's your job to make sure the reader is aware of. Especially in a language like English that's only 500 years old, and its depth of expression is weak. It has a double past tense, which creates confusion, shown and shined, but there's supposed to be a sort of a shade of complexity between them, but in reality, it's just a defective past tense, something that other languages don't have. So when you have these problems, this is the issue that you face. Now, this is a West German dialect that we're speaking that also has Saxon roots to it, and then there's Greek things that have been added in, Latin and other, right? So we have to keep all this in mind when we're translating from a language that's more stable, like Mandarin, like Arabic, like Hebrew, like Turkic, languages that are stable, that have undergone very little reform or change in the past several thousand years. There's a reason why, for time capsule research, all the great classics like Chaucer and such are being translated into Arabic and being put in time capsules, because scholars of these classics are saying, in the next few years, English will be unintelligible to the next generations that come. Now, I challenge anyone listening to this, because it's not a knock on the English. I think the King James Bible was the best piece of literature ever produced in English. This is not a knock on the English. It's because of the rules for their language were established very late. Now, the Oxford English Dictionary is a masterpiece, but it leans on the work of Samuel Johnson, who was single-handedly the one that created the structure that we recognize now in discussing the grammar and such. You study Samuel Johnson, this man was a genius. But the change of the English language, so if you go and study English, right? If you study Middle English, you'll start to struggle. Elizabethan English, right? The English of the time of Shakespeare and that, you will struggle to read that. Like if you've ever read Shakespeare's plays, like Macbeth and Much Ado About Nothing, it's unintelligible.
Yes, yeah.
Then you read Old English, which is completely unintelligible to contemporary English speakers. Let me tell you something. If I read Arabic from 100 years ago, Arabic from 500 years ago, Arabic from 1,000 years ago, I can understand it.
Unbelievable. Mashallah.
The vocabulary may be slightly different, but I can understand it. It's intelligible. This is a problem with the English language. Now, you're talking about translating something so important as a text on creed from the mother tongue into the receptor language. And then you yourself, though, don't know enough about the creed or comparative creed. So you're now presenting this to an English-speaking audience. You're irresponsible. And so this is not the first time this has been done, but it's been done on a number of occasions.
Is this the reason when you translated your theological works that you provided a large amount of footnotes?
This is part of the reason, is for clarity and to try to make up for the 30% that gets lost.
Sure.
I'm trying to make up for that as much as I can. And initially, the first one that came was people were saying, okay, the books are breaking up the text because they're at the back of the text. Man, these are huge, and I have to keep flipping back and forth, right? Then for the book after that, they said, okay, now they're really intrusive because they're in the text rather than at the back. And sometimes there's 8 pages worth of footnote in the text I have to wait, right? So then I said, okay, I've got to adopt a middle path, but I can't not have these notes. They have to be in here.
Absolutely.
I can't not have them. And my introduction, at the front of every single book that I've ever translated, there's always a note on translation.
Right, yeah.
So that they understand, why am I making the notations the way I make them? Why am I not using the Harvard or Chicago manual of style exclusively for citations? Right. What is AD and AH and what is, all these types of things? Why is it sometimes for some people, okay, well, the ayah citations that you're using from the Quran, it's like a couple ayat different from mine. Well, the qira'ah that I'm using is different.
Right.
Or the hadith collections, why aren't you citing them according to this? Well, we have to understand the history of hadith citations and how they're cited, right? This is an amana, a trust that I have to convey. So when people read that, then when they enter the text, they enter okay, now I can just focus because the preliminary things that I needed to know have been established.
Right.
And the same thing is with something so important as creed. You have to be especially careful with this.
The thing that you just mentioned about the introduction, which was that there are different forms of translation, like you mentioned, formal, literal translation,
dynamic.
And the like. Yes. Okay,
yeah, so you have these types of things. You have your formal, your dynamic, your your literal. All of these things are important, and they're going to impact. There's very few works that are solely formal or solely dynamic or solely idiom-based. Usually when you have a project like a book, there's going to be a combination of these styles.
Right.
You have to be able to present them to the reader in a way that's, number one, concise and comprehensive, and number two, enjoyable.
Right.
It's not enough just to translate for the degree or just to translate just for the sake of translating. What exactly are you trying to convey? I try to think about when I translate, is this something that's needed?
Right.
I don't like translating things that are all people have come to me, oh, you should translate this. That's already on the market. There's already that subject matter has already been treated. I don't like to keep plowing over the same area.
Sure.
I like to do things in which there's a genuine need for it. And when there's a genuine need, you translate in a way in which it fills that need. When you teach, that's why I ask people, listen, I want to do this one time, and then don't ask me again about this subject, unless it's something I haven't done or there's some shortcoming that I've had. For example, the signs in the time, I systematically went through that, the way it was laid out, how it was done, from the fulfillment of the prophecies, so that you do a service to the ummah. You do a service to them, particularly those that are English speaking and may not be able to access the sources. So when people say, well, can you shorten it down or make it snappy or whatever? No, I can't. Because the needs and requirements that people have in order to be able to comprehend some of these deeper subjects requires that it be lengthy.
Right. Absolutely.
Requires that it be long. And the creed and the foundational matters of the creed and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us, that's been handed down to us from our Salaf us-Salih, this requires a level of depth. It's not like the difference, it's not, you can, if somebody studies some of the opening rules of tajweed, you can learn them fairly quickly. Like if you say, okay, the letters of qalqala are qaf, ta, ba, jim, and dal, and then you can start to implement them fairly quickly. Creed, after that initial la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, where you've rejected everything that is besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, well, now your heart has to be filled with more. What are you to believe? What is your motivating factor in your life? How do you deepen your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How to add different levels of intimacy to it? That's all within the creed. But the things that would prevent that are mindless debating, polemics, charges of takfir and tashbih. You ask some of these people that are deep into these chat room battles and these other things, their lives aren't reflective of Islam. Their lives aren't. You look at the people that are deep into these battles, that seem super duper knowledgeable. If you met them in person away from their library, they don't know anything. That's why they only like to talk online. Because that's when everyone's Ghazali. You say, okay, we're going to shut off the electricity in your house.
Sure. Now
go online and talk about, well, I'm going to have to get back to you. Why? Are you away from your library now?
Yeah.
If this is that important, shouldn't you know this knowledge and have imbibed it to a degree to where it doesn't matter where you are? You can recount this information.
It should have been memorized, actually.
A lot of this should be inside of your cranium and in your heart because you're implementing it. Like, for example, if I said, yo, brother Imran, all right, let's get ready to make Dhuhr. Oh, no, brother Abu Ja'far, I'm away from my library. I can't. That would be crazy. Because from the time you were really young up until, say, probably about 11 or 12, where you finally had mastered and understood, okay, this many rak'ahs goes for Dhuhr. Because learning the salah, like the fiqh of the salah, it was a lengthy process. And you started out as a very small child, first of all, learning about, okay, these are different waters, then your salah. And when you were little, I'm sure you remember asking, how many rak'ahs? We're praying Dhuhr now. Okay, is Dhuhr how many? 4. Okay. And then you had to remember that there's a qiyam, then a ruku, then a coming up from ruku, then a sujood. You had to remember that little stuff. Now you do it without thinking. Well, the same thing with our creed is there's a building that process that's there. Where the theology is built. And that hasn't yet happened in the United States, Canada, and the UK. Muslim orthodoxy has not been preached yet, not on a mass level. There's individuals that have taught it and things like that, but it's never been preached on a mass level because it would be too much of a threat to the people that are doing what they're doing right now. If it was preached on a mass level, you'd see maybe more than half of these masjids closed down because people would know that these people are lying and they're hucksters and everything else. When they find out that there's zakat money's being stolen, they find out that their children are being molested, when they find out that they're only being taught enough creed so as to battle with the masjid next door, when in reality they're brothers. They're actually the same. And what they're battling over are periphery matters. If they woke up to that fact, it's over.
Yes.
All these mosque councils and committees and charity commission, it's over. When they find out that in some cases, some of these mosques these imams are pulling down 50,000, 150,000 a year from zakat al-fitr money that's supposed to be getting distributed. When they find that out, it's over. So there's a benefit in keeping this type of stuff going, because before then everyone had to be Sufis and have bay'ah.
Yes.
And the thing is, you can see it's the same characters doing this over and over again. Before then, they were Salafis or whatever else. It's like, okay, was there a time where you people were ever stable?
SubhanAllah.
You know, it's just one of those things. It's like one of my teachers said to me once. He said, you look at some of the people. He's speaking to me, but he was also speaking to other of us who were in the class. He says, some of the brothers that come to this masjid, he said, they've been through every group imaginable.
Interesting.
He said they've been through every group and he just listed off like a litany of like the groups that were prominent at that time. Mm-hmm. He said there's been every single one. He said, and they're still in doubt. He said they're in doubt about the group they're in at this moment, and they're looking to go to the next group. He said, and it takes nothing but an internet discussion to convince them.
Why is this actually?
It's because of how they learn to digest knowledge.
Okay.
It's what they classify as knowledge and how they learn to digest. So because they've been through that 15-year school system, they've been taught that you gain knowledge that knowledge is obtained through debate for debate's sake, and considering all options, no matter how ridiculous or asinine. So someone will be looking at some affair or some argument and say, well, he does have some good points. So then they'll start to incline in that direction. So we're like, okay, wait a minute, hold on. But what are your foundational principles? Well, I'm just looking for the truth. Well, if you're looking for the truth, at some point you have to find it, right? And you have to get established upon it. Then once you're established, you shouldn't be going from here to there, from here to there, right? But they get in these issues because they assume that debate is how you get knowledge.
So they're basically applying the Socratic method.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So this is something that occurred once where I myself and another Muslim brother stopped dealing with one another because he invited me to his house for a dinner, which I thought it was just, we're going to sit down and exchange pleasantries and enjoy each other's company. And when I arrived, there's another Muslim brother there from one of these prominent sects from 10 or 15 years back. And he's trying to get us to debate. Okay. And I said, well, what's the purpose of this? And he said, well, hopefully, when you guys talk and everything else, we'll get to the truth. Well, but the truth is already established, though. Because if the truth is already established, it really doesn't matter what we're going to debate about.
Right.
Because the truth is already out there. Yeah, but I'm just looking to understand what. So I'm sitting here, food's getting cold. Muslim brothers that have been expecting, this red hot debate. Some of them are standing against the wall, looking at each other, murmuring because they came for a blood fest. But that's not what they got. And so they were expecting a blood fest where there's going to be some yelling and screaming. And if you've seen it online, if you go online, sure. The main videos that you'll get when it comes to Islam that are in the English language are debating,
right?
Or when a guy is quote unquote teaching and he's yelling like the whole video.
Yes.
Oh yeah, he's really going for it, is he? Can you imagine, how do you think you'd learn engineering if your teacher was yelling like the whole class? You wouldn't.
Right.
You'd think that this person has mental problems. But for some reason in Islam, we assume that when the guy's yelling like the whole video, and he's yelling in lesson after lesson after lesson, and I'm using the word lesson courteously, he's yelling and yelling and yelling, and it's like, does this person have, is it like maybe this person might be a rageaholic? There might be psychological issues. but you're doing this whole time. We wouldn't accept that in any other circumstance. Obviously, you would raise your voice at certain points when you're making a point. That's perfectly understood. That's fine. And there'll be times where you have to raise your voice or you have to get angry because of disciplinary action or whatever else. But no one would accept if in their social studies or their English lit class, the teacher was just yelling for the entire 55 minutes. Like every day he's yelling. And his microphone, like if he's using a microphone, it's on echo and he's yelling. No one would expect that.
No, it's
But no one would accept it. They not only would they not expect it, they wouldn't accept it. But we're expected to assume in the English language that that's how Islam is best digested.
And debating is prohibited, actually, according to the Hanabila, right?
Yes, in Creed, debating is impermissible.
SubhanAllah.
Because this is jidal, khusumat, mira. These are all the words we use. Now, ikhtilaf is different. This is for fiqh. And so in terms of ikhtilaf, these type of discussions that happen because they're based on evidences where a text could mean one thing or another, and these discussions are allowed because ikhtilaf is coming from the root of the basis of discussion, the background of a conversation. That's why that's permitted. See, that's the area where people should be using their mind and their imagination and expressing the excellence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them in their not. That's where they should be doing it, because that's something that we can know when we say, listen, it's been made forbidden from you, meat found dead, blood, and the flesh of swine. Okay, well, how far does that application go? Because we know what blood is. We know what swine is. We know what meat found dead is. So now we have to go into application of how far do we go with this? That's where you use the scintillating brilliance that Allah gave you. Because you know what pig is. You know what we don't know what yadullahi is. We don't know what that is. We don't know what istiwa for Allah. We don't know what that is. So trying to get into these like really detailed topics and discussions, you are spinning your wheels on a track to nowhere. Because you don't have detailed knowledge of this.
It reminds me of a very interesting incident. I believe this is quoted in Kitab al-Sharia by Imam al-Ajuri, that a man came to Imam Malik and he asked him to debate him and said, if I defeat you, that you follow me. That Imam Malik asked him along the lines of, what if someone else defeats us? And he said, then we follow him. You know, the structure of debate and
and it is a very serious problem, because those people that get into that, it's going from one debate to the other, one debate to the other.
That's what I mean, exactly.
Yeah, I was with so and so, and then he did this. Like there was a man online. He said that he converted to Islam. And they're like, okay, that's great, that's wonderful. And they said, what happened? What were you before? He said, oh well, I was Jewish. So, okay, all right. So how'd you convert to Islam? Oh, I was online. I was in a chat room. There was a debate, and I was overwhelmed and defeated, and I converted. So the interviewer rightly said, well, who's to say that you won't be in a chat room with Catholics and they overwhelm you with points on, the Catholic Church and the infallibility of the Pope, and then you're overwhelmed by that. The interviewer, he was right in that question. He was saying, well, who's to say that won't happen? Because their debating is like I said, if you look at debate as a means of gathering knowledge, you're always going to be at a disadvantage, because you'll be going from debate to debate to debate to debate, and you're spinning your wheels. You are honestly spinning your wheels.
Absolutely. Just one more thing before I proceed, because you meant translation. Is it actually permissible to translate the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
When you talk about these affairs, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah had a qa'ida that is attributed to him in al-Fiqh al-Akbar by his students. Namely this: one is permitted to translate words in Arabic in reference to sifat of Allah or other affairs, as long as they have the same shade of meaning in the receptor language and they don't necessitate a limb. If the receptor language only has certain words in which they necessitate earthly things like limbs and body, then you would not. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, being a Persian, he said that yed should not be translated into Farsi. It should be left as yed. Because that the Farsi that he was speaking at that time, I don't know if it's the case today because I'm not fluent in Farsi, but he said the Farsi, the way that it's spoken, yed, and he listed another few attributes. He said it necessarily entails a limb in that language, and it doesn't have any other shades of meaning or any ambiguity in it. So we cannot do that.
And I believe you also have an article translated on this topic by the Marja Imam Khidr al-Hussein, I believe.
Yes. We had a discussion on this simply because of how important this topic was, and the discussion of it was, because some Muslim brothers that we had met before had said that, well, if you don't say yed, if you say hand, then that's major kufr or blasphemy or whatever else. It's like, well, that depends, because the same level of ambiguity or allegorical nature in English, the word hand in English doesn't have to mean a limb as it would in the Farsi in Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah's time. So we understand this, because we can see, if I'm carrying something heavy and I say, oh, Brother Imran, can you give me a hand with this? That doesn't mean you rip your own hand off. It means for you to give me some assistance, right? Or if we're sitting in an auditorium and we say, let's give Brother Imran a hand, we understand that we're not to go and lift our hand and give it to you, but we're supposed to applaud. And then we understand that when someone's referred to as being someone's right hand man,
right,
that doesn't literally mean that he's on his right, but that he's his greatest assistant or his greatest student or whatever. So there's the English for some reason has these different shades of this. So we'd be able to preserve it, right? Just as much as when someone says in English, face the music, he's got to face the music. What is he dancing? No, not dancing. So what is he facing? Or he has to face up to his responsibilities. Well, do responsibilities have a physical form? How does he face it? What are you talking about? I need to meet you face to face. Wait a minute, hold on. So we press our faces together when we meet? No.
Yeah.
So if we know that it doesn't entail necessarily a limb, then we can translate it across.
Okay.
But we still don't know what it means, but we can translate the expression yed across. We can do so. But if we necessarily would be translating across for, oh, it's definitely a limb, or it definitely can only mean a created thing that belongs to a human being or a creation, so okay, we can't do that.